I just wanted to say that one of the odd things about study abroad is that students come abroad to study. They often have very intense and life-changing experiences, and then they return and carry on with their lives. And those of us who remain here, we often wonder what happened to those people. So it's always great when we do hear from students and hear what they've been doing with their lives. And if you ever ask yourselves, should I get in touch and tell my old professors how I'm getting on? The answer is always yes, we'd love to hear from you. So that brings me on to my first question to Stuart. And Stuart, it's great to see you. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about your study abroad experience and especially the impact it had on your subsequent studies.
Sure. So thanks, Alex, and thanks, Jody and Jennifer and the IES team who's helped organize this this chat or conversation this evening. For me, I'm based in Brussels, as many of you know, calling in the evening. So good afternoon or good day or good evening, wherever our other IES alumni may be calling in from. So salutations to you and to those who may see this video in the aftermath of the talk that we have today. So yes, Madrid was a pivotal moment in my life. For those who were close to me in Madrid during those study abroad months and years, actually, because I did the summer program at IES, and then I stayed on through the fall, and then for the next spring. So I did a full year, actually. And you know, the three things that stick with me about Madrid are, when I was thinking about this, about how to contextualize it. I mean, it was a unique experience in the sense that Madrid is accessible. It's a very easy city to walk around. You can get from the Parque Retiro over to the Templo de Bod in half an hour going through Puerta del Sol. You can take the metro easily from north to south. It's a very accessible, you know, capital city, let's say, in comparison to Brussels, where I live now, which is very fragmented and different neighborhoods, different clans almost. So in that sense, you know, Madrid sticks with me as a city to live in, let's say. And I haven't enjoyed cities as much since living there. I'd also say that Madrid is very central. So for those who have been there and my colleagues who may be listening from the Madrid years will remember that in Puerta del Sol, you have this punto next to the Ayuntamiento, right there in Puerta del Sol, that gives the kilometrage radiating out to different cities across Spain, which is really cool. And I remember standing there and thinking, wow, I really want to go to Galicia, or I want to go to, you know, Picos, or I want to go to Barcelona, or I want to go down to Granada, and they had the kilometers. And then my third point about Madrid and my time there is it's extremely memorable. I ended up writing a book about my time as a study abroad student, and I forgot to mention this to you guys in the intro a few weeks ago. It came back to me. It's actually, I actually tried my hand in Spanish, which was quite daring at the time, but I was a cocky little guy back then, and you know, it was called ungiri, which, you know, you guys remember means a foreigner, or like the Spanish version of gringo. Ungiri entre otros. And so I told the story of my time there very, very transparently and openly, and talked about Johnny Madrid, who was my buddy who would play the piano in the Sesamo bar, the Sangria bar. I told about my adventures with Charlie to Valencia with the Fallas and elsewhere. Talked about Adam Jackson, my roommates with Marisa, you know, from southern states of the United States. So that was quite an experience to meet an American abroad from the South that I've never been to the South of the United States. So in that sense, very, very enriching, extremely enriching experience. And my novel was not, you know, selected for the awards, and it's gathered dust somewhere in the archives of my shelves somewhere. But yes, Madrid was a life-altering experience for me in many ways.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's interesting what you said, that a lot of students always say to me that as well as learning about Spanish culture when they're here in Barcelona, they also meet people from other parts of the United States who they might not have otherwise have met. So that's an interesting point too. So then you left Madrid, and I think it's always interesting to see how people's careers evolve and the different forces that move them. So you went back and you graduated, I think, in literature and theatre at Williams College, and ended up running a sustainability communications firm in Brussels. So what was the route that took you there?
I mean, Alex, this is a long story, so I'm going to give you the abbreviated version. It does not include theater. I majored in poli-sci at Williams, and I minored in comparative literature. And so being in Madrid opened a whole new world of words and language and literature in that case. And that's where I really got into reading and writing. And I knew I wanted to do something more creative than poli-sci, let's say, as interesting as international relations is. You know, I always sold IR as well. It's like people, but countries, you know, interacting and so on. But after I finished Williams, I got a small grant to go to the American University of Beirut. And there I went to do an MA at what's called the Center for Arab and Middle East Studies, CAMES program. And I didn't really know what I was getting into, except that they were giving me a decent little grant to go there. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So I got on a plane like a week after September 11th and went that way when everyone was going that way. And it was pretty interesting. It was actually the calm years, you know. It was between 2001 and 2005. I left shortly after the assassination of Rafik Hariri, Prime Minister of Lebanon at the time. Master's is 2 years and I had extended it to 4 years. So I got a bit sidetracked coming back to Madrid, going to Morocco and so on. And actually I learned a decent level of Arabic, and I learned in learning Arabic that Madrid comes from the Arabic word majrit, and majrit means these subterranean canals, and it's a reference to the Roman subterranean canals in present-day Madrid. I never knew that when I was living there, and so crossing the Mediterranean to understand the connection of the size of the Roman Empire and so on was also quite eye-opening. I've gone back to Madrid. I've lived in Madrid since then, and I never actually found any subterranean canals. I did find some hammams and some tea cafes that have popped up, you know, some Moroccan influence. But anyways, going back to my experience in Beirut, you know, that's probably the worst place to learn Arabic because everyone speaks French from the colonial period, or they speak German from the Orientalist, or they speak whatever, you know, anything but Arabic, because they think that they're still Phoenicians in many ways, and they prefer to not, at least the Christian Lebanese prefer to not relate themselves to the broader Muslim world, let's say. But yeah, so I started going to Damascus a lot to learn Arabic, and that opened a whole nother world of history and depth of culture. And so it's tragic what's happened to Damascus and Aleppo and the whole world there.
And Beirut, yeah.
Yeah, and Beirut as well. With this, I mean, it's not the same. I mean, nothing is the same as it was before, obviously. But at that time, I fell into journalism. I just started writing stuff, and people asked me to talk on some radio shows or whatever. And at that point, I was much more politically engaged, let's say. Now I'm a bit more distanced politically from everything. It's probably better for one's sanity. But I started covering the Arab-Israeli conflict. I got into the whole Gaza issue. I covered the Israeli disengagement from Gaza in the summer of 2005. And from there, I was taking some photographs and interviewing some young resistance guys, part of Islamic Jihad or Hamas or something like that. You know, and they were doing the victory sign and so on. I was like, I'm okay, not sure about that, guys. But I got a call from a think tank in Madrid asking me, well, will you come back and work with us on security development issues? And yeah, I dropped my camera and got on the next bus out of there. And then I moved back to, I thought I was going to Toledo because it's called the Centro Internacional de Toledo para la Paz, CITPAX. And so I told my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, I was like, well, I think we're going to go back to Toledo. And she was like, well, it's not far from Madrid. And it turned out that the office was right next to El Prado.
Oh, lovely.
Perfect location there on Felipe Cuarto. And it was a dream job at the time I was in my mid-20s. You know, I knew where to go in Madrid for the nightlife. I had buddies there from just a few years ago. So yeah, I worked in Madrid actually for 4 or 5 years there in from 2005 to 2009 on security development issues around the Mediterranean. Turkey, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria a little bit, you name it. And then I started Revolve.
Okay, so there's quite a curious path, fascinating story of how you got there, and then you started Revolve. And can you just tell us a bit more about what Revolve is, what it does, how the idea came to you?
Sure. So Revolve is now a communication group about sustainability. We cover all different kinds of sustainability issues. And we can go into more detail later about that if you like, for student courses and so on. But with the magazine and with the projects that we're involved in, we provide the services of basically any other communication agency out there under the sun, but our focus is on sustainable issues. So we don't engage with oil and gas directly. We don't engage in coal or, you know, some plastics. We try to avoid that. All topics that are like seriously damaging our environment, we try to stay away with. And we even if it's, you know, a gas company that may be making the transition towards hydrogen, we have to do some serious due diligence to understand what's going on behind there. But, you know, now Revolve has 4 companies behind the brand Revolve, and it's a small but respectable communication group, let's say, talking about sustainability issues. When I say that, I mean like water management, energy efficiency, sustainable mobility, ecosystem restoration, circular economy. These are the main themes that we will deal in. And we're not necessarily specialists in any given topic. We have a pool of experts that we can dip into and rely on as external consultants or whatever for a given task. But the fun part about Revolve is that our projects are always about a different aspect of sustainability, you know, whether it's the energy transition, as I mentioned, or making cities more resilient, or addressing climate action, these kinds of things. So that's where we've evolved to over the past 10 years, actually. It's tough to say that. It's been already 10 years. But I started it as a magazine. I started it, I mean, you know, coming from my experience in the Middle East, where everything we see is portrayed very negatively, you know, poverty, women's issues, political assassinations, unemployment, blah, blah, you name it. Like everything from Northern Africa, Middle East is really quite negatively portrayed in broadly speaking Western media, let's say. So my first attempts with Revolve magazine were to try to spin that into a more positive, a more constructive way of reporting on the world. And I didn't know it at the time, but there's something called constructive journalism. And so later some advisors came around and, you know, you make a little bit of money in this world and all of a sudden you have sharks that start nibbling everywhere and you get consultants asking you for things left and right. But one of them came around and was like, you know, you're doing a great job with constructive journalism. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. And we stuck with it, and Revolve magazine is still alive today. I encourage everyone that's watching this or that's logged in today to sign up and subscribe to our magazine. It's quarterly, it's international. You can go to revolve.media/subscribe, and you can get it delivered to you in print. But that's not our moneymaker. Like our main source of income now is projects related to sustainability. And in between there, we pivoted. I did the typical entrepreneur pivot of trying to find how to adapt our communication service model towards other forms of communicating. So since starting the magazine, we've done numerous photo exhibitions and large, public communication campaigns with UNDP, with IRENA, which is the International Renewable Energy Agency out in Abu Dhabi. We've worked with UN Environment, UNEP, on our Forest City project. We've done a couple of shows at the COPs, the so-called Conference of the Parties, which the last one was in Glasgow, as you probably know. The next one is in Sharm el-Sheikh. And so we've spun out our skills, let's say, at communicating in a quality way about sustainability. We've done it in different formats, and we were picked up by different projects wanting to do, these EU-funded projects which encompass larger partners, larger consortium, and so on, related to the issues that I mentioned before.
Yeah, and you have offices in different cities, I believe. In fact, one of the advantages of these connections is we found out you have an office in Barcelona. I think hopefully we might have students interning there in the summer. Where else do you have offices?
Yes, I mean, the Revolve adventure continues, and we set up our office in Brussels in 2014. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was with our LLP. And then we created a nonprofit a few years later in 2018, I believe, 2017, also in Brussels. In that time frame, we were looking at water issues around the Mediterranean. And that's when we started our Amouage Alliance. So if you look at amouage-alliance.com, you'll see our Mediterranean-focused initiative or platform that brings together members, and its focus is really on communicating the value of water, targeting young professional journalists, researchers, and policy. So those are our three stakeholder groups, and we've done 3 forums now, trying to connect the Mediterranean Sea. So our first one was in Amman in 2016, under the patronage of His Royal Highness Prince Hassan of Jordan, and with some substantial funding from PepsiCo MENA, I should say. And from there, we brought the Amouage Forum to Barcelona in 2018, and then we went back to Beirut in 2020, and now we're looking at Sharm el-Sheikh for next November in 2022. But so that helps give a little bit of context of why we set up an office in Barcelona. Like our focus with Amouage, which means waves in Arabic, it's very much about trying to instigate or propel or propulse like waves of positive vibes, of movement of people, of goods, of trade, of opportunities, energy, of course, of water, of course. And so in our little way, we've made a little splash in the Mediterranean, and it's been really quite an adventure going back and forth with these forums and trying to connect different cities and regions, let's say, of the Med. And at some point along the line, I told my colleague Patricia Carbonell, who's in Barcelona, I said, well, let's just dive in and set up a company there. I didn't realize we'd have to put everything into Catalan, and then we'd have to jump through a couple of more administrative hurdles. but she made it happen, and that's how Revolve operates now. Is that it's quite decentralized. Like the team in Barcelona is about 10 strong, 8 to 10, 12, depending, with consultants and interns, as you mentioned. We're very happy to be starting a internship program with IES down there. We'll also be hosting some students from IES in Brussels, which I'm very happy about as well. We do have parallel programs ongoing with other universities, like the University of Southern California. So this is reinforcement, and it gives me great pleasure and great humility, actually, after all these years, to be able to reconnect with IES in this way. It's very nice. We do have one more office in Vienna, again, decentralized, but very early in the game. It's called Revolve Circular. It's about circular economy stuff. It's right in the heart of Vienna, very nice location. And yeah, we have a couple of staff or, freelancers in Lisbon, in Portugal, and we have 2 fabulous ladies very active in Mumbai, India. But yeah, so Alex, I want to ask you as well, like we've been talking about a lot about Revolve, but could you also tell me what you guys are up to with a new course that you're planning to bring online, sustainability, and this innovative approach that you were mentioning? If you tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, no, it's already been online. And in fact, when you were talking about your decentralized approach to Revolve with the offices in different cities, is making me think about this course. I was lucky enough about a year ago to be asked to participate in a new course idea, which came from Michael Adewumi, who's on this webinar today, related to the IES Abroad Global Pillars. IES Abroad has developed 3 global pillars based on the United Nations Development Goals, which are sustainable living, human well-being, and equitable living. And the idea is to develop courses around these pillars, but courses which take an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approach, and also a multi-location approach. So I was asked, with other faculty from other IES centers in Milan, Freiburg, and London, to develop this course, which was quite a challenging thing, because I think certainly at IES we have no course of this type taught by different faculty at different centers from different disciplines to students in the different locations. And the idea of this course was to try and make it as much as possible a hands-on course based around problem solving, identifying sustainability problems in the different cities, and then coming up with possible solutions. And we've just completed, just before the Easter break, the first semester of this course. In fact, I know that at least one of my co-faculty, Alejandra Galleros, is on the webinar today. So 18 students or 17 students in the end from Barcelona, Freiburg, and Barcelona, Milan, and London. 5 faculty, and bringing in different theoretical perspectives, disciplinary perspectives. I come from an anthropology background. Alejandra is an economist and did her PhD in sustainability. We have a historian in London and a designer in Milan. And the students were also all from different disciplinary backgrounds. And so in the first part of the course, we introduced them to a number of key concepts in sustainability. And we were trying to not teach them about sustainability, but just give them some tools they could use in order to then identify problems in the cities and work on those. And one of the strengths of the course also was that the students coming from different backgrounds and working together in groups in each city, but also in groups across the cities. In the end, they came up with it in all 3 of the cities. They identified key problems around mobility, which is one of the biggest sustainability issues, obviously, facing cities. Air pollution, carbon production from non-sustainable transportation, lack of mobility. And then the groups in each city worked to produce a solution in their particular cities. In London, the solution was related to extending the use of lockers for deliveries and making those more available, and encouraging those use in order to discourage the use of delivery trucks, which account for a very high percentage of the air pollution in London. In Milan, the plan was to develop to encourage the culture of cycling, because Milan has cycle lanes and it is flat and it has great possibilities for cycling, but people are culturally very attached to their cars. So their plan was to work with companies to encourage cycling amongst workers in order to bring a shift in the city from seeing cycling as something you do at weekends to being seen as an effective mobility solution. And in Barcelona, the students came up with quite an innovative idea of a type of shared electric public transport to cover the last mile or the last couple of kilometers in cover the gaps at the edge of the city for especially low income and more marginal groups of population who don't have who've have problems getting to their place of work in terms of safety and also in terms of lack of public transport in some parts of the city and filling in those gaps. And so they all came up with some very well thought out and very careful plans, and we were very, very pleased with that. And this
would love, sorry to interrupt you, Alex, we would love to feature some of these solutions that the students come up with in our magazine and our platform at Revolve. So there's definitely plenty of content, plenty of material to exchange and collaborate on as we move forward together. As you can see behind me here, this is an example of a forest city in Nanjing, China, and it emanates from our efforts to connect nature-based solutions with urban conglomerations and so on, and integrating trees, nature in the urban fabric is what was behind our initiative called Cities for Forests. And I'm quite proud to say that Revolve was one of the co-founders of this global initiative of some 70 cities around the world. And Brussels being one of the first to sign on. To go back to your point about urban mobility and nature-based solutions, one of my great frustrations is that when I talk with the Minister Smith here, who's of mobility, I tell him, yeah, fine, put in as many bike lanes as you want, less cars, less metal boxes is great, but can you please put some trees in next to the bike lanes? And it sounds simple when I say it like that. It sounds kind of like, duh, like we should do that. But one of the challenges is that they're metros beneath the ground, right? Or there are cables, or there's lighting, or whatever. So, anyways, these topics are all fascinating, and we'd love to, follow up with you guys and your students and involve them in feeling like they're part of something bigger. This is one of the things about sustainability is that we all feel like we're kind of loners unless you're part of a co-op or 360 degrees with Bill McKibben, but most people don't really dive in because they're like, well, what can I do? I'm just by myself. I'm just a mere mortal, making my way in this world. So anyways, happy to collaborate in the future with you guys.
That would be a great idea, because I was just talking with some of my colleagues about this. It was an intense experience. Everyone has been working really hard on this. And we finished and they presented and it was great. And then we were thinking, what can we actually do with these ideas? We don't want to just leave them there to wither. So, if I will definitely talk to the students about this and see if we can get in touch with you and see if we can take any of these ideas forward. And what you were just saying, I think that's one of them. It's quite interesting what you're saying. It sounds simple when you say it, but one of the main objectives of this course was to try and show to students that everything in sustainability is complex. Even the simplest ideas, when you try to actually develop them, is complicated. So you have to start small, and look at all the details to make sure things work. So this idea of lots of small interventions can add up and have a big solution. Which brings me on to one other question I have for you. As we all see, students are becoming increasingly aware of all these worldwide challenges, which are to some extent encapsulated in these three global pillars. And at IES, we're trying to bring in courses like this, which are more hands-on and really focus on these challenges, and to help give the students the tools they can use to make a difference. But what advice do you have for any students who would really want to make an impact in the field of sustainability?
Well, it's a big question. I think you have to believe in it. You can't really do it half-assed, excuse the expression, but like you either go into it or you don't. That being said, sustainability is such a broad term that there are many different forms of sustainability. There are many different fields of sustainability that a student could go into. I myself personally was not particularly prone or going in that direction when I was in university. I didn't take environmental studies or things like, I didn't master in environmental studies or biodiversity or whatever, but there's so many different areas that one could specialize in if one wants to become a specialist. And that could mean going into sustainable finance, for example. Finance is a whole nother bag of beans that's related to sustainability if you do it sustainably. If you have your investment streams and you have your partners, and if you can go into like public-private partnerships that are really interesting. If you can do it well, you can get some big money behind some real projects without doing the greenwashing if you're able to spin it properly, and that's just mentioning very briefly the whole finance side of things. And then you have ecosystem restoration, for example, which is more about the environment and ecology and restoring nature, essentially, which is the big move now by the UN environment with their UN decade on ecosystem restoration. And you have some really cool initiatives like the ecosystem restoration camps. This is really a neat model of doing form of ecotourism while actually restoring a forest or watershed or wetlands or savanna or whatever. They have little camps around the world now, and it started in Granada. It started in Spain. To bring it back to our, IES Madrid Spain saga, let's say, 20 years later here. There's also sustainable mobility that you mentioned. There's a very powerful and big organization called Union Internationale de Transport Public, UITP, Public Transport Union. Wow, these guys do very interesting work in China and India and South America and so on, all about pushing trams, electric metros, the electrification of things and so on. There's the energy sector. So, to answer your question in a nutshell, without expanding too much, I don't think that if a student today wants to dive into sustainability, the only reason holding them back would be that they're not interested in a better world, basically, because there's so many, as I'm trying to describe, there's so many different sectors or fields that you can go into that can lead to more efficient ways of producing something, or more ecological ways of doing a certain service or whatever. There's so many options now that it's almost a cop-out to say like, oh, I'm not going to go into sustainability. That being said, sustainability washing is also like very broad, so you got to find the balance. And I mean, whoever the student is that may see this, like, try to pursue what fulfills you as a person. That's also like one thing that I would try to transmit. I think sustainability and more resilient ways of doing things is better. And I think that the IES Abroad Global Pillars is definitely going in that direction. So I really applaud you for that, and hope that we can reinforce your efforts. I mean, one part that you mentioned here is like equitable living, and that's about social equity. Again, like that's a huge topic. That's also about our societies being more sustainable. Like, can we reduce the health gap between rich and poor? Can we reduce the whole salary gap between men and women? How is this possible in the 21st century to have a salary gap? I find this like mind-boggling. I think the world would be a better place if it were run by women, and that's why we have so many women at Revolve. And we also have quite a strong sustainability policy that I invite people to visit on our site. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's great, and I agree with you that people need to believe in what they're doing. But I do think more and more students really are invested in these issues, especially in the last few years for obvious reasons. Concern about sustainability issues and an interest in actually really wanting to do something to make a change in the world are becoming increasingly noticeable amongst our students. But the other thing, as you said, these issues are very broad, they're transverse, they're cross-cutting, and what we tried to highlight with the course is that you can look at these issues from a lot of different perspectives. And speaking to our students afterwards, they said, a lot of them said they had a much more narrow vision of sustainability, but then we looked at it from a design perspective, from a social and cultural perspective, from an environmental sciences perspective, from a historical perspective, and they said that suddenly this opened their intellectual horizons a great deal. And we also had students who thought that they weren't, as you say, they didn't have the background to work in sustainability. A student said to me, I'm from marketing and I feel kind of out of place here. And I said, well, marketing, if you're, as you say, if you're really interested in this, you can make a great deal of difference, of course. So there shouldn't be anything holding people back from taking part. This is a fascinating conversation, but I am aware that we should be leaving some time for people to ask questions. So I wonder, should we hand it back to you, Jody, now to see if there are any questions from the public?
First of all, thank you both. Really just incredible at really just even touching on such a big topic that it affects us all. So even, an hour is not really enough, but it is good to kind of get a dip in and see where we can take part, which is really important. We do have one question from Alina. She asks, Stuart, through your firm's unique point of view, where have you have access to multiple companies? Have you seen a significant shift of demand for your work? Any particular industries that are more active? So have you seen more demand from any particular industries?
Yeah, let's start with the negative news. So we've been approached by oil and gas since our reputation has grown, and there's a strong O&G lobby in Brussels, and they came around and knocked on our door to see if we could do a little greenwashing for them. So we attracted the bad boys in town. We declined as part of our sustainability policy. It's too bad. It was a decent sum of cash that would have come our way, but one has to maintain their integrity and reputation, etc. So we declined that. Sustainability and resilience topics are gaining. It used to be trendy. When I started Revolve, it was a bit trendy and people were like, oh, you're just jumping on the bandwagon. Now it's part of how people do things. It's part of how, at least in Europe, like companies try to integrate sustainability practices in their production and supply chains, for example, much more so than before. We're moving beyond the typical corporate social responsibility, CSR stuff of just ticking the boxes of recycling some cardboard or whatever, So the companies are really trying to move in that direction. And in Brussels, we've seen growing interest from industry associations that are trying to get their message across about the value of heat pumps, for example, and bringing energy efficiency to retrofitting buildings, new buildings. We've seen interest from, we did a nice report with the hydrogen industry that's quite strong now. They've really been growing in momentum here. Hydrogen's a bit controversial because of the overlap with gas, but if you produce hydrogen from renewables, then you're making green hydrogen, okay? So you're not doing the gray hydrogen or the purple or whatever the other ones are. So we work quite closely in the past couple of years now with the hydrogen industry here in Brussels, and we're working towards COP27 next November, which will have an Africa angle. So there's a whole hydrogen movement in Africa that's emerging, which is really interesting for multiple reasons. One of them being that Europe's foreign funds go in a majority to sub-Saharan Africa. They see an interest there geostrategically. So things like heat pumps and hydrogen have definitely been interested in working more closely with providing, you know, solid or quality communication services, whether it's in messaging or in reports or in organizing talks like this. We pre-COVID, we did quite a few, you know, activations with policy people, with industry and with media. We're quite strong with media relations, which is sort of the missing piece, let's say. At least in Europe, they're less strong than in the US on just getting their message across. You know, you guys in the US have comms and marketing running in your blood, basically. It's part of your pitch, you know, everyone's a performer, basically. In Europe, they're much more quiet, let's say. So we help with media relations, and we help do, you know, photo expos and that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's been growing interest. We stay away from the bad boys, as I said, and we try to reinforce our relations with those that you know, that are really trying to move in that direction. We've been approached by some big corporates too to help with their messaging. I can't name them. They're surf brands though, so that's kind of cool that, you know, the bigger ones out there are really thinking like, all right, well, we've got to differentiate ourselves, not just with our nice little promo videos, but like, how do we actually do it? How do we implement a real sustainability policy? So that's been exciting to follow and to be invited to.
We've had another question. Has the magazine ever considered having a posting section for professional opportunities in sustainable positions, so that people can know of opportunities to be able to do global good and be able to have a career?
That's a good question. We have not gotten there yet. We have not gotten there. It's a good point though.
Okay.
It's a good point. Something that I started to explore that we did start to integrate sustainability oriented events. And the next step I remember at the time was, well, why don't we have a job section like they have in The Economist, you know, in the back where they post jobs, obviously, but that are focused on sustainability. You know, to be transparent, like, it's a question of resources, and we just don't have the manpower to be producing content and doing projects and looking to do a job section. But thank you for mentioning it. I think it would be interesting as well.
You can give that project to the IES intern this summer.
Yes, good one. I already got a task written down on. Okay.
There you go. We also, as Alex mentioned, we have one of our instructors for the Sustainable Cities course with us, Alejandra, and I wanted her to really quickly say what one of her groups of students is involved with. So Alejandra, I think that I have I've given you the microphone. There you go.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Buenas tardes. It's a pleasure for me to be here today and, well, obviously to being asked to talk a bit. I don't know if there was a question yet, but here I am.
I just thought really quickly, if you could say what you wrote in the chat so that people know what the students are engaged. Your project is with the study abroad.
Yes, well, Alex already mentioned that we are starting this new course, the interdisciplinary course on designing the sustainable city. So it was also, I think he already mentioned, it was quite an intense experience for both the staff of teachers and professors and the students. So I thought that it was a great opportunity for me to start to steer up again my own sustainability, which is called Sustainability Challenges and Answers. That is the current course I teach at IES Barcelona. And I thought it was a great opportunity to change the way I was doing class as well, because I had this basic structure of a midterm and then a final exam and all that. So I asked students, which I know they kind of hate when you change the rules at the last minute, but I asked if they were willing to be involved in a different way of doing things. So instead of having the final exam, I asked them if they were willing to take on a final project for the whole class, because normally they do presentations on groups. So we have about 4 or 5 groups per course. And this time it was something the whole class was aimed to get involved into, and surprisingly they said yes, or not so surprisingly, because I exchanged that for a final exam. But the thing is that it worked quite well. We had tasks divided into people designing a flyer, which you can see here in the link I posted. I don't know if it's visible or not, but if not, I could resend it, then we can also upload that somewhere. Some other group of students did a slideshow, and another is preparing a Google form that we're that we are aiming to send to as much people as possible. So we know this for this time, this is mainly a project to design the structure of that, because the idea is to have sort of a trip abroad or something like that, so that people, students normally during the course buy stuff that they need in their abroad experience. Basic stuff like hangers or an extra pillow or a blanket that sometimes is not provided in their apartment or whatever, and they can't bring that home, and they end up in the trash. And that happens every course, and that happens quite quickly. In my perspective, obviously we know we're supposed to be thinking about how to extend the useful life of a product, and not to keep this linear approach of buying, using, and then trashing. So I was quite pleased to see how they got very involved in this activity. We are actually also, instead of the final exam, we're doing a video on the final day where my class is bringing their stuff, because obviously we had so little time, we couldn't do a demonstration for the whole IES Center in Barcelona, but the class is bringing their stuff to the classroom to make it visible what these things that would end up in a trash can, how can they be reused, or we even thought of donating them at the end of the class. And preparing maybe a TikTok or a short video that we could send as a way to make people aware of the issue, and to start doing something that we can change. Things even at a small scale, but still we gotta start somewhere. So that's the experience of my class. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share it here.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a fabulous idea to empower the students to find a way to be sustainable and to leave behind things for others to use instead of throwing them away. A thrift store for study abroad, that's a fabulous idea. So
also the fact that this new course, the Designing a Sustainable City, is already cross-pollinating ideas into existing courses, and and bringing those in and changing the method of teaching and the approach to learning somewhat. So that's part of the idea, to extend this model and begin to bring the global pillars into more and more of the IES curriculum. Yeah.
Great.
So thanks, Alejandra.
That's super. Yeah, thank you again, Alejandra, and thank you both, Stuart and Alex, for all of your expertise and the stories and your experience that you shared today. We've all learned so much, and everyone, I did include links in the chat to all of the different sites that Stuart mentioned, as well as there is from Alejandra, she included a site as well. So please resource those. And then I'd like to add one more resource to the chat. So upcoming May 17th, we will have Opportunities Abroad Day of Giving, which is a day that we will celebrate all things study abroad. We'll be featuring stories from our faculty and our alumni and our students and our scholarship students, and they'll be sharing their stories of abroad. We'll invite everyone on social media who has traveled or studied abroad to share their anecdotes as well. And all of these stories, all of these informational sessions will be celebrating study abroad while raising funds for scholarships and for a few specific challenges, match challenges, one of which will be the Sustainable Cities curriculum, which we plan in this next year to transition from a pilot curriculum at 4 centers to a scaled curriculum at 12 centers. The students have really responded well. They feel empowered. And even if they are becoming, journalists, lawyers, whatever their profession that they envision for themselves, they are planning to now engage in sustainable practices in those careers. So it's really a powerful course, and we're excited to be able to bring it to more students. And we need philanthropy to play a role. So Opportunities Abroad, May 17th, there'll be a 2-for-1 match. And we invite you all to join us on that day, learn from other stories abroad, connect with your friends from abroad, and we'll have a great day. So thank you again, everyone, for joining in this event today. Apologies for the technical.